Hello there and welcome back to Raise Your Vibes. This is Miriam Khan. Thanks for tuning in. Today's topic is about my new book that I published and that's now live on Amazon. About a week ago, I believe it became live. I'm currently working on a Kindle version and a Kindle edition of that, and obviously due to editing times and things like that, hopefully it will be out soon, so you're gonna have to hold on. So some of you may or may not be aware, I am a published author and writer. I have been writing for quite a long time, actually. Since I was in my teens, I was always into storytelling and story writing. In fact, one of the very first books that I sort of published, which wasn't officially published, but it was a book to help students at college who had failed their A levels or hadn't got their grades or hadn't got their AS levels, because I was in a similar position myself. And I ended up doing this like self-help and book for other students in that particular position, because there wasn't anything there. There wasn't anything to support those students. I had also some poetry published prior to that in my teens. And then obviously when I did the college sort of paperback version, that ended up being published through the whole of Sheffield colleges. You know, we were a big network there of people, and they realized that, you know, they needed to do a little bit more for the students that unfortunately didn't get the grades that they had wanted. Okay, so I had been on the scene, I guess. I had been on the scene of writing and doing various things and so on. And later on in my late teens, I had done quite a lot of storytelling. I was into English language and literature, mainly literature, hence becoming an English teacher. And over the latter part of my years, with the various experiences I have had and the various things that I've done, you know, several people were saying to me, you know, you should really start putting down these little golden nuggets and these words of wisdom that you keep speaking and keep saying and keep practicing, which was through my life coaching and through my motivational speaking more than anything else, as well as counseling skills. But I had realized that I did need to, you know, the friend that suggested that to me was correct, and I should sort of start doing it. So I started doing words of wisdom, which I'll have, and at some point I will also, you know, publish that in a little pocket book perhaps. They are on my Instagram platform, they are on my Facebook platform. Links I will provide down below in the feed. But it took a while for me to actually start writing other things too. And what I did last year during a lockdown situation was I actually pushed myself to write and write properly. And I ended up publishing my first book, which was like a drama, you know, a classroom sort of scene, and it's called Beyond the Classroom Gates. That's also on Amazon out there. Then I published another book not long after that, which was about key Afghanistani texts. It's something that was close to my heart, something that I had looked into when I had done my master's. And that particular text was quite revolutionary. I was talking about quite a lot of political themes, religious themes that are in key texts similar to my culture and similar to my traditions and similar to my faith. However, the book that I've recently just published, which is called Diary of Abuse by a Loved One, so far that has been the most difficult book that I have written, and I'm going to explain why. When you are a teacher, when you are a life coach, motivational speaker, when you're someone that has been a child protection officer and a safeguarding officer, so these are positions within education where you are protecting the most vulnerable, the most abused people within our society, children that are in and out of care, teenagers that are in and out of care. You are working with their families, you're working with their, you know, intrinsic aspects of what has been going on and what's been happening around them. You can't help but feel a sense of compassion and a sense of wanting to help these individuals get back on their feet again. And also when you have witnessed for a number of years, when you've been a counsellor, you've witnessed, you know, quite a lot of horrific things in your career, in your personal life. You've been in and out of situations when you've done home visits, or you've dealt with people from a personal level or from, you know, an intrinsic level or worky level, where you're dealing with quite a lot of cases of abuse and trauma. That it was a bit of a wake-up call that since COVID, it seems to have spiraled out of control. And I felt quite passionate that I needed to do something about that, and I needed to record it, and I needed to put it out there. You know, there are different levels of abuse now. There's different levels of people facing different types of trauma. And some people are able to tell their story and some people are not. So what I'm going to do is read out the dedication I did at the start of the book, which hopefully might put it into a bit of context for those of you that may wish to read it. So here we go. To all the survivors of abuse out there, long may we continue to heal and be strong. Some of us stay where we are because we have no way out of our enclosed emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual prisons. Some of us have a torch shining on us now and again, showing us the escape routes to freedom and emancipation. And others build a successful escape runway and keep running from their past trauma, not looking back over their shoulders. Unfortunately, some of us are not alive to tell our tales of woe, and overcoming our pain with a heavy heart, I have to say some of us are not free within our minds. The memories and scars keep us prisoners forever, and some of us are able to move forward and heal others along the way. Wherever you are on your stage of abuse, just know that love and guidance is there. Try to reach out for it. Some of it starts from the inside, but we have to find that self-worth and self-love journey first before we can heal properly. Blessings to you on your road to recovery from abuse. Miriam Khan. So that was my dedication, because I knew that from the experience that I've had dealing with various types of abuse, that this particular scenario, this particular word has definitely expanded. And I go into it in a little bit more depth when I go into it in the preface. So here's the preface for you. Like I said, you can read the rest when you purchase the book, either through the Kindle version or through a paperback version through Amazon. Here's the preface. Abuse can happen to anyone, a woman, a man, or a child. It is not gender-based, nor is it ethnically or culturally based. Abuse is abuse, and in our current society of 2021, it appears to have grown and changed in how it is handled, or even on how it occurs within our community. This is an account of some of the issues that arise due to abuse and some of the experiences that people have faced firsthand due to this. Names, places, identities have been changed, but all of these diary accounts are from real life scenarios that I am familiar with in one way or another. Please remember, abuse does not need to necessarily have to be physical. It can be emotional, financial, psychological, sexual, discriminatory, organizational, or can even include modern slavery. You are not alone, and there is help out there for you. You just have to ask, which is often the hardest thing we can do for ourselves. When I was thinking of this particular idea, the different characters that I created, the different people, the different walks of life in my particular diary of abuse by a loved one, I was thinking of various people I had come across in the years of either teaching or counselling, friend-wise, personal experience. Understandably, quite a lot of that information I have kept to myself, and changed names, changed locations, changed identities, understandably, because as a counsellor you keep that information confidential. However, you use your imagination when you're a writer. You use the aspects of yourself that you're aware of, the familiarity. And we were always told with English, when I was at school myself, to always write from experience. Experience is your best teacher, and that is the best tool when you are becoming a writer. And it's something that I have really used to help home in and to think about all the different aspects of abuse that my book covers. I have various different characters that I've dedicated several chapters to, and each character, in the book of Diary of Abuse by a Loved One is facing quite a lot of challenges, quite a lot of discomfort, quite a lot of abuse that for some is intrinsically clearly abuse, and to some it's not. Some of it's coercively abuse. And that's one of the things that I wanted to tackle, in this book. I wanted to tackle all the different aspects that people have. I wanted to tackle all the different people that we have, that are facing abuse. Previously, people would stereotype it and think that it's just applicable to females. Well, it's not. Abuse can happen to children. Abuse can happen to men. I've counselled a lot of men that have suffered abuse, in various ways, as well as females, young children, like I said, with my career. And this particular book, when I was writing it, it's taken me over a year to write, was the hardest book that I have to say that I've had to write. And it's been hard because the emotions and the feelings and the trauma, even though I know that this is purely out of my imagination, I could feel myself being these specific characters. There were times when I had to stop writing and I would weep, I would weep at some of the things that I was writing. Okay? And as and when you look at specific characters that I've written about, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Okay? I can give you a brief insight to that. One of the characters that I talk about is called Annie. And she's in a very, very difficult position where she's got a young daughter and she's trying to get herself out of a particular predicament that she's in, and she can't. I'll give you a bit of reading from that particular chapter, which starts on page 15. Okay, so this is an extract from that particular chapter. Here we go. I managed to pull myself upwards and let out a small yelp of pain as I tried to sit upright and look down at her peaceful face. She was the reason I was now staying in this existence. I wanted to leave now more than ever, but I was trapped. He made sure I was trapped. I was deflated and exhausted of being used like a wrestling bag, a punch bag, to his violent episodes. But where would I go? How would I look after the both of us? I glanced at Lucy, only to start sobbing like a little child again. I felt so helpless, and at the same time, I felt she was the reason I was keeping myself from living, or should I say existing, on a daily basis. She was the reason for me gaining the little strength that I had. Before, I felt nothing. I was invisible. I was a nobody. Now I was a mother who was responsible for someone else existing, and I had to start thinking smart and think of a plan to get us both out of this situation. I didn't want either of us leaving this property, or should I say home, inverted commas, in a body bag. We needed to leave, and we needed to leave and live in peace somewhere else and start again. That finishes on page 16 of my book. Understandably, the characters that I look at, the characters that I explore, they all have various issues of abuse and various issues of trauma. Some of them, when I've explored this, stay, some of them leave, some of them forgive, some of them try to escape. All of the characters face different scenarios that represent the current climate of abuse that we have. Since the pandemic of COVID, started last year, there's been a significant rise in the number of people, unfortunately, that are living on a daily basis with abuse. And one of the things that I personally had through my divorce, it triggered me, I guess, to make sure that I was raising my voice for some of the things that I had been silent about, some of the things that I had buried, some of the things that I had squashed so deeply, knowing full well that this wasn't right, that I was not worthy of this treatment, that I deserved better. But sometimes it's so painful, so hurtful, even as someone as smart as myself and knowledgeable as myself, someone experienced as myself, it's very, very difficult to voice out loud that you are also suffering from abuse, because again, like I said, there is so much stigma out there, there is so much judgmental people. There are people that will say to you, you should stay in that marriage, you should not divorce. And there are others that are forcing you to stay there because of financial means and financial reasons. Or it could be that you're the one that's financially making the money, But the trauma and the abuse, the mental abuse, is just far too exhilarating, that you haven't got the strength and you haven't got the energy to leave. And this is what makes it so difficult. A lot of my podcast recently has been about narcissism, and narcissism goes hand in hand with a lot of individuals that are on the abuse spectrum as well. From that special educational needs background that I have, you see quite a lot of people with mental health issues and mental health problems, and people that are inflicting pain upon others on purpose, or vice versa, and it's very hard. Like I said, this book definitely deals with those issues, and it does deal with some of the in-depth characters and their internal turmoil of trying to escape, of trying to move and be free, and trying to get out of the situation that they find themselves in. And like I said, often that is the most difficult. Often just voicing it can be extremely difficult. And it's the first step forward, but it's the most difficult one that we have to make. And there are times when, you'll see that quite a lot of people, when you're discussing the fact that it's a topic of abuse, they find it hard. They find it extremely difficult to just be able to ask for help, and sometimes there are scenarios where people will make sure that you stay broken and you stay in that, abuse state. And some people never get over it. And that's one of the reasons that I wrote this particular book. And I'm sure I'll be doing other topics like this, but it's very, very cathartic as well when you're writing it from, a point of view where you've come across these individuals. And don't get me wrong, it is extremely painful. There were times when certain chapters that I wrote were so mentally and physically draining for me as a writer, I had to stop. And I couldn't come back to finish the book because it was just too traumatic for me, And there are times when you are writing, you do come across, a bit of a block, I guess, and it stops you from writing until it's the right time. And then there are times when it just flows, So each of us will have this scenario where we are facing different aspects of trauma and abuse. We'll know different people as well that have faced that trauma and abuse as well. And it's about how we are compassionate towards them, hopefully, how we help them and how we support them, how we encourage them to grow and heal, and how we help them to move on. And some of us can't move on. You're forever scarred. You're forever holding on to this pain that this other individual has caused. But you also have pain within yourself, because you also have to acknowledge the fact that you've tolerated that pain and abuse. I'm not saying you have to place the blame on you. I'm saying that we all have to acknowledge our own part in that lack of empowerment or over-empowerment, where the ego and the id has sort of taken over. And that is definitely one of the things that my book does. It explores all the different dynamics of modern day abuse, and modern day trauma. And I'm doing more and more work this summer on CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'm making sure I'm staying up to date with the relevant theories and the relevant aspects of CBT, because that's what you use in counselling. There are other techniques, but these are aspects that people will come across and use. What do we do to move forward? How do we gain help? Well, in my book I do give the phone numbers of various charities and organisations that help and support people that are in this particular predicament. There's lots and lots of help out there. You can get in touch with your doctor if you're within the United Kingdom, that is, and you can ask for counselling. It is a long step, of course it is, but the fact is that you're actually voicing it and trying to get help is a big step. Speaking to loved ones, speaking to family, again, it's a tricky one, because some families will support you and some won't. And some of us keep repeating our same patterns and same behaviour issues, and sometimes we don't see a way out. We don't really have people that understand exactly what we're going through. They don't really get it. They don't understand how we have tried really hard to escape those particular scenarios, and they don't get the understanding that we have, voiced it, which for us was a big, massive thing. It's very hard to acknowledge to anybody that this is the pain I'm suffering, this is the abuse I'm suffering, and I need help. Like I said, these are the very, very, very first steps that we make, and those are the hardest, they're the most difficult, but they're the ones that help us to recovery. And some people will never understand why some people that suffer from different types of abuse keep going back and keep going back. They're often labelled as being weak, when actually they're quite strong for staying in that predicament and staying in that particular scenario, because it takes a strong person to be able to build up this resilience and build up this strength to stay there. They're not weak at all. Okay, the other person has deflated them and knocked them down, but they're not weak at all. And that's another thing that my book looks at. I've been doing some other podcasts recently with two writers. I'll put the details down in my feed, but there's two writers I have, two authors should I say, similar to myself, who've both done books on domestic abuse and narcissism, mainly narcissism. Alison Dagny and Maggie Petrarchi, both on my podcast show. We did some amazing podcasts where we tackled this topic of narcissistic abuse, and it's becoming more and more clear that more people are now writing about their experiences, as well as coaching, supporting, helping, loving, encouraging others to leave. And I guess that's something I'm doing as well, through my podcast and through my counselling, and through the work that I'm doing now, through the books that I'm publishing, and by speaking to you, whoever's tuning in and listening in. It's there because we must leave that area or place of help for someone else out there. You never know who could be tuning in, reading what you've written. They could be in a similar position, but they're just in a predicament where they think they're by themselves, and you're not. You really are not. We are, as a society, hiding all these issues. We're covering up for these abusive people as well, and we shouldn't do that, but we do. We really do. And it's a situation where we should try our very hardest to encourage people to speak up, and that in itself is the first step. It's not easy to say to someone, I'm struggling, I'm finding this hard, and that is the bit that is very, 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 very painful for a lot of people to acknowledge and to move forward from. So if you know someone, if you are suffering from abuse, if you know someone who's suffering from abuse, or you just want something to read, please go ahead and read my book, because hopefully, it helps others. Hopefully it helps people to search beyond what they have at the moment, and it helps them to move forward. It helps them to gain a sense of pride, and maybe it helps someone to be strong. Please help others. If you find someone in that scenario, in that situation, please help them to get out, help them to move forward, help them to start on the path of recovery again. Don't leave them in a predicament where, unfortunately, as a last resort, God forbid, they're in a body bag. In worst case scenarios, that can happen. It really can. Please look out for each other. Step in, call the police, help a loved one out. Don't be judgmental. Give them positive praise. Even if it's just having a cup of tea with someone, help them. That's our duty. Definitely our duty to help others. Take care. Thank you for tuning in. I will put the information about my book on the Amazon feed in my link. Hopefully, like I said, at some point I will have the digital version of that on the Kindle out, published. Hopefully, I just need to tweak it and edit it, but hopefully that will be out soon. And thank you for your support, thank you for your encouragement, and thanks for tuning in to Raise Your Vibes. Take care, God bless, blessings to all, bye for now.